Tony Khan in Impact Wrestling, because once again last night we saw AEW President, CEO and founder Tony Khan along with AEW color commentator Tony Schiavone appear on last night's edition of Impact Wrestling on Access TV. This follows their appearance last week on the very same program, and it was essentially a similar segment. Now, there was a new paid advertisement by AEW President Tony Khan and head commentator Tony Schiavone as they appeared last night during Impact on Access TV. In the paid advertisement, Tony Khan said he had no issue running these paid ads on Impact because he's happy to help, quote, fund the program. He also said he wouldn't be slapping on an injunction to AEW World Champion Kenny Omega for being on the promotion whilst he's still under contract with AEW. This is what Tony Khan had to say. He said, quote, "It's great to be here on Impact Wrestling helping fund your program via these paid ads. You get a lot of nice things here on Impact Wrestling. One of those things is AEW Champion, World Champion Kenny Omega. I'm going to let you keep seeing Kenny. I'm not going to slap an injunction on him because I think Kenny Omega is one of the two best wrestlers in the world, along with Jon Moxley, who he stole the championship from. And I think there's nobody better than Kenny Omega to go around and show the image of AEW. I just wish he didn't win the title the way that he did." Now, Tony Khan also called out Don Callis, the Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President and Kenny Omega's manager and mentor, during this paid advertisement. He told Don that if he decides to show up on tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite, he will teach him a few lessons about the wrestling business. This is what Tony Khan had to say, quote, "Don Callis, you came to my show and taught me a lesson. You taught me nothing, Don. We did our biggest rating of the year. I've got one of the greatest champions in the world and he's out here doing free press for us that I'm not paying for. I'm happy to pay for these ads though, Don, and I'm going to teach you a thing or two about the wrestling business. I'm going to see Kenny tomorrow and you're welcome to come with him if you want, and I'll start teaching you your lessons," end quote. So this ad then concluded with the AEW commentator Tony Schiavone also taking shots at Impact and a preview for the card for tomorrow or today's episode of AEW Dynamite on TNT. Now, of course, this is the second ad after last week. We did a video last week talking about the ad that Tony Khan and Tony Schiavone did. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was actually quite a lot of fun. It was nice to see, at the time, Tony Khan's first on-camera appearance in pro wrestling. Of course, he's done some cameos in AEW, appeared in some backstage shots. We've heard his voice on a couple of occasions talking to Jon Moxley, etc. But last week was the first real Tony Khan promo, as it were. The irony being that the AEW president cut his first on-camera promo not on AEW TV, it was on Impact Wrestling TV. But I really enjoyed the ad last week, but personally, if I had to compare them, which why not, let's compare them, I personally felt the one this week was even better. I really did think it was even better. It's really quite surprising how much of a natural Tony Khan actually is at the promo game here. I mean, I think he's really good. I think that he comes across very, very well. I felt that this week's ad promo, I mean, let's call it a promo because that's what it is. It's a promo. I felt it felt more fiery and it felt more personal than the one last week did. Last week's was kind of, here we are, it's AEW on Impact Wrestling TV, it's a bit of a novelty, Kenny Omega, I'm not scared of you, I'm allowing you to be here, blah, 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 and it felt like just kind of a tongue-in-cheek, this is the relationship between AEW and Impact Wrestling. This week's felt a lot more storyline driven, it felt a lot more personal, a lot more fiery, had a bit more venom in the way that he spoke, and especially when he addressed Don Callis, and there was a lot more pot shots by the likes of Tony Schiavone, talking about why when you tell your smart TV to tune into Access TV, they say, why would you even bother doing that? It felt much more real, I think, and less tongue-in-cheek, and I like that kind of thing. It was kind of, you know, this week's, it was full of shots. It was full of shots by Tony Khan at Impact and Don Callis. As I mentioned, the Tony Schiavone Access TV comment was great, and I really like the logic of Tony Khan saying, you know, I'm doing these adverts to have my rebuttal, as it were, to what Don Callis and Kenny Omega are saying and doing, but I'm also doing these ads to ensure that everyone knows that I'm in control of the situation here. He has mentioned twice in these paid ads, the one last week and this week, that he is allowing Kenny Omega to appear on Impact Wrestling and that he's not intimidated by this old carny pro wrestler, now executive Don Callis of Impact Wrestling. He's not intimidated by Impact Wrestling in general. He's got AEW and he's the president of AEW. And these last 2 weeks on Impact Wrestling, of course, as I mentioned, is the most we've ever heard Tony Khan talk on camera. And I think he's done a good job. I think he's done a very good job. It's the most promo time he's ever done. As I mentioned, it's a promo. It's not a paid ad, really. It's a promo. That's what it is. It's a promo. It's a vignette by Tony Khan. And Tony Khan, in these promos, in these paid ads, he does the majority of the talking. Yes, Tony Schiavone's there, and Tony Schiavone does get in a quip or two and a little bit of a comment here or there, but it's mostly Tony Khan talking here. It's Tony Khan driving the promo, it's Tony Khan driving the narrative and sending the message home about this Impact Wrestling and AEW storyline. I think it's quite funny because Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore, of course there's two Impact Executive Vice Presidents, Don Callis and Scott D'Amore. Scott D'Amore responded to this on social media and said, you keep standing there with your arms folded with the hands under the bicep kind of deal. And you can see the picture there. He does have that look for the entirety of the promo. He doesn't move his arms or his hands or anything like that. The folded arms under the bicep look is a bit awkward at times, I think. I think physically he can be a bit stiff there by the way he stands and his mannerisms. And initially last week when he was doing that, I felt like that was him maybe being a little bit uncomfortable in front of camera. I mean, it's natural. He's not a performer. He's not a pro wrestler. I'm sure he's cut the promo in the mirror a million times like we all have, but it's one thing to do it at home. It's another thing to do it in front of a camera that airs in front of thousands of people on national television or on cable television. So he was a bit stiff in the way that he was stood and his mannerisms. But I think if you remove all of that, I think Tony Khan's promos in these paid ads, I think has been really good. I think he's been really good. And I think he comes across very, very well during the promos. And what's most important here to me with these Tony Khan and Tony Schiavone paid ads during Impact Wrestling is it all makes logical sense. And by that I mean is you have to realize what the storyline is here. You have to realize that the story, what is being told here, what they're trying to drive home, what they're trying to tell us as an audience in terms of the story here. The story being told here is so important, right? The narrative here is that they're saying on AEW TV, and they said this last week on Dynamite, and they've said it in all the promo packages that we've seen when they talk about that Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley match at the Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite. The narrative here is that Don Callis and Kenny Omega, and therefore Impact Wrestling by proxy, they screwed AEW. They screwed AEW, and they screwed the AEW president, owner, founder, Tony Khan. Don Callis said it himself on social media. AEW screwed AEW. Tony Khan screwed Tony Khan. It's their version of the Montreal screw job, as it were. Now, is it on the same level? Of course it's not. It's all a storyline, just like Montreal. But no, that's the storyline here, is that Tony Khan was screwed over by this wrestling carny guy. And it plays on what is real life. It plays on real life because there is a bubble of people on social media. There is a group of people on social media and just in pro wrestling. I think there's some people in the business as well that think this. They legitimately think that Tony Khan is just this billionaire fan, right? With too much money in his pocket. That was basically like, I don't like WWE, I'm going to make my own wrestling promotion. Like we've seen over the years, right? We've seen it quite a few times over the year. Was it the UWF, Herb Abrams, all that kind of stuff? We've seen it happen time and time again. I've got money, I'm going to make a wrestling promotion. And that's the perception of Tony Khan, even 18 months after the fact, even though they've been on TNT for over a year, even though they signed a 3-year deal. They're profitable in their first year as being a company, which never happens just in business, let alone pro wrestling. There is still this perception of Tony Khan that he's this billionaire fan, he's naive, they question his credentials, his credibility in being the president of a pro wrestling company, and the big suggestion is that he doesn't really know what's going on, he's naive and he's going to get taken advantage of in the pro wrestling business, just like the likes of maybe Dixie Carter did in the past. So Impact Wrestling and AEW, they're playing into this. They're playing into this narrative. And I've said it before, the storyline here that they're playing into is that Tony Khan is this naive billionaire fan. And he allowed the old school, wily, carny, ex-pro wrestling pro wrestler Don Callis, now turned promoter executive, into his promotion. And Don Callis got into AEW under the pretenses of, I'm just here to watch Kenny. I'm here to be there for Kenny Omega's big moment, his big matches. And what happened? Because Tony Khan is this naive billionaire fan, Don Callis, being the old school pro wrestler that he was and now an executive of a rival promotion, he took advantage of this. That's the story they're telling here. He conspired with his friend, Kenny Omega. They broke the gentleman's agreement. in that match with Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega on the Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite for the AEW World Championship. They broke the protocol, they broke this unwritten code, and they stole the AEW World Championship and, most importantly, the AEW World Champion from AEW, and they've taken him to Impact Wrestling, and it was all part of this grand plan that Callis and Omega thought up, and they screwed over the AEW president and AEW. So, yes, there is so much coming out of all of that, and that's what I really like about this storyline when it just comes to the AEW and Impact stuff, because there are so many layers here. There are so many layers here. Yes, the storyline for AEW purposes is Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley. That's the feud going on right now. That feud isn't over. I'm sure we're going to get an Omega-Moxley rematch probably soon. I would suggest maybe they're doing some specials coming up. That might be when they do it. That's when they might do the Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega rematch. But there's also a lot of splinter stories coming out of it. Yes, you have Moxley versus Omega, but you also have Kenny Omega reuniting with the Bullet Club on Impact Wrestling. You also have Kenny Omega feuding with Rich Swann going forward in Impact Wrestling. You then have the Good Brothers getting involved with Kenny Omega and then start to feud with the Young Bucks that we know is probably going to happen on AEW TV. Might even start tonight. We know that Don Callis now is feuding with Tony Khan. They're taking pot shots at each other over the television air, and they're going to do it over social media as well. So there are so many layers to this story. There is so much going on when it comes to this story. It's not just about Kenny Omega at this point. It's kind of about AEW versus Impact Wrestling, and I think it's only just beginning. So I think the idea of these promos with Tony Khan, this is just the beginning of that. Now, do I think Tony Khan's going to become a regular on-screen character in AEW? I don't think he will. I think it's a very difficult thing for him to do at this point because, well, for several reasons. One, he said he wasn't going to do it. Previously, when he was asked before, are you going to become an on-screen character? Are we going to see Tony Khan on AEW TV? He was like, no. We've seen that in other companies, WWE with the likes of Vince McMahon, etc. He's like, we don't need to see that. I'm not a wrestler. I'm not a performer. I'm just going to be running the company, helping out and doing that kind of stuff. I'll leave the pro wrestlers to do the pro wrestling, essentially, is what he said before. So if he did do a U-turn on that, he would probably get criticized for that right now, and people would bring up those comments. And also, I think, as again, the narrative is on him, is that he is this billionaire naive fan, which I don't subscribe to that theory at all, by the way. I think he's done a fantastic job. If he did start to appear on AEW TV, then people would say, oh, look, here we go. Another billionaire owner starts his own federation, then eventually he has to get involved just because he's a fan and all that kind of stuff. So he would get heavily criticized, I think, if he did become this regular on-screen character in AEW and was a focal point of the TV show. I don't think that will happen. But I think he is also very, very important to this story. This AEW story versus Impact Wrestling, this Kenny Omega appearing on both shows, this Don Callis element. He is very important to all of this because it's logical. It's logical. And that's the most important thing that I've mentioned here before when it comes to this AEW and Impact Wrestling story here, is that you can't lose the logic in this story. That's why Tony Khan has to be involved. He has to. Realistically, and I hate to use, if this was real life, because I know in pro wrestling people go, oh, but it's not. But this is why logic is important. If this was real life, and your champion of your promotion, right, Kenny Omega, if you're Tony Khan, if this is real life, this was the UFC or whatever, and your champion stole the title, and then he just randomly started appearing on a rival promotion, on a rival station, and was doing all of this stuff for a rival executive of a rival promotion, you would have to respond. If this was really happening, if the AEW World Champion just randomly started doing dates with WWE, you would have Tony Khan respond. Yes, it's in the sense of storyline and Impact Wrestling TV, but if this were real, of course Tony Khan would respond. He would have to. If he sat there silently, and if Kenny Omega just was doing these appearances on Impact Wrestling, you would say, well, realistically, why isn't the AEW president getting involved? Or why isn't the AEW president at least commenting on this? Why isn't he not saying, I'm allowing Kenny Omega? Because some people, rightfully so, would say, how is Kenny Omega even allowed to appear on Impact Wrestling, right? He's under contract to AEW. He should be banned from appearing on any other pro wrestling program, in the sense that if you're under contract with AEW, you can't appear anywhere else. If you're under contract with WWE, you can't appear anywhere else. Even if you're under contract with Impact Wrestling, yes, you could appear on the indies, but not any major pro wrestling show. That's how those contracts work. They're exclusive. So again, there's logic there. you have to explain why and how Kenny Omega is allowed to appear on both AEW Dynamite and on Impact on Access TV. That's why these Tony Khan paid advertisements, these promos, these vignettes, that's why they're so important, because it plugs any gaps in logics. Because if he didn't respond, it would be a massive plot hole, and there is no doubt people on social media would be saying, how come Kenny Omega's allowed? That doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. It's a little bit of forethought. It's a little bit of thinking ahead of time again and going, okay, this needs to happen, that needs to happen, because it needs to make sense. So it's needed. It's needed for Tony Khan to respond here. It's logical. But in terms of Tony Khan appearing on Dynamite going forward, will we see Tony Khan tonight? I mean, you don't know. He said in that promo, in that vignette last night on Impact on Access TV, that he was going to teach Don Callis some lessons when it comes to pro wrestling. So maybe we might get a Tony Khan promo tonight. I don't know. Again, I think it's a very fine line he needs to walk there because of his previous comments. And again, it's the perception of him, right? There still are quite a few people on social media, for whatever reason, who aren't convinced that he's legitimate or he really knows what he's doing. He's just a guy with a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if he would be really... Again, it would be a fine line he has to walk if he does that. But could we see Don Callis and Tony Khan maybe come face-to-face in a backstage segment tonight? I think anything's possible. I'm not sure how comfortable Tony Khan would be appearing in the ring with a microphone in his hand on live TV. Maybe that's a step too far right now. In terms of a pre-taped backstage segment between Tony Khan and Don Callis sitting across each other at a table, I mean, that's possible. Anything's possible. And like I said, if it makes logical sense, then I really don't have a problem with it. As I've mentioned before, this is such a hot angle and a hot storyline right now. It's got so much buzz. So it would be stupid and naive, quite frankly. We've used the words naive. It would be naive if they didn't capitalize on it, if they didn't reflect real life. The best angles, the best storylines in pro wrestling is when they reflect real life. I've mentioned it before. There is this suspension of disbelief when you're watching pro wrestling. It's the same when you're watching a film or a movie. You know what you're watching on TV isn't real. You know what you're watching, if it's a film or a TV program, whatever, it's not real. There's been multiple takes, there's a script, it's entertainment. It's the same with pro wrestling. When you're watching it, you know deep down it's not real. But there is this suspension of disbelief that you overcome, and then you're invested in the program, and you don't even have the question of is this real or not, blah, 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 because you're invested in what you're watching. When you do a real storyline or a storyline in pro wrestling that reflects real life, those lines get blurred so much that the suspension of disbelief isn't even hard anymore. And you do start to question, well, I know it's all a storyline, but that thing he said there was quite close to the cuff. Maybe that's real, and you can just... It's more enjoyable and it's more believable. That is the biggest thing in pro wrestling. Is it believable what you're watching? And when you have the president of AEW appearing on Impact on Access TV and saying these things that make logical sense, or I made sure that Kenny Omega could appear and blah, 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 and I'm going to make sure that Don Callis can be taught a lesson about pro wrestling, it makes sense. So I thought Tony Khan and Tony Schiavone did an excellent job. I like these paid adverts, and I think his promo's just getting better and better. So I'm not against seeing more of these in the future. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Tony Khan and Tony Schiavone's paid advertisement from last night's Impact Wrestling on Access TV? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. All opinions are welcome, so get involved with the community below. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.